As we think about light, it's a very fitting time of year because more so than probably any other point in the year, we put up lights, we go seek out lights, we go visit them, we put them outside our house, we put them inside our house. This is kind of a season of lights in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's so true. One of the things that my wife and I, and now our kid, do on a yearly basis is we go out into the city and we explore and we see some amazing lights that people put up, and we just marvel at the beauty of what they did. So I have a couple pictures, if it's okay. I can show everybody. Is that all right? Can I show you guys some things that we saw? Because we've seen some things. So the first one is this one. This one is just like incredible. Like the detail, the fact that they had all the deers posing for this picture is just it's so impressive. It's so impressive. I don't know how they did it. I don't know how they did all of these lights. Like I would not be able to do that. Like I wouldn't have the patience to be that meticulous and like putting up lights.
Yeah, and you don't like heights.
That's true.
Your lights would go this high.
My lights would go about this high. That's as far as it goes. Actually, if you see my house, it's as far as it goes. It's as high as it goes. And then we went to this one. And this is from the Botanic Gardens. Has anyone seen the Botanic Gardens during Christmas time? Yeah, a few of you guys have. It's absolutely gorgeous. And it's so beautiful. All the different lights and all the different things and different colors.
Did you take the photo?
No, I obviously did not take the photo. I can't reach that high, so yeah, I was on my ladder doing that. So,
okay.
Yeah. But then there was another one that I saw that's really incredible, and this one is just really decked out. And what's cool is when you drive up, you can actually, if you've done this before, maybe your house is this. If so, let me know. You can actually like go to your radio and set it to like a certain like signal, and it actually plays like Christmas music and has moving lights and does all these different things, and all the lights are moving up and down, and it's like a huge rave for Christmas. It's so cool. You see all these cars lined up. It's such a cool experience.
Did you just say a rave for Christmas?
A rave for Christmas, yeah. You can.
We didn't practice that line.
Didn't practice that one. Nope, not at all. No, unfortunately not. And then we come across this one. Peace on Earth. If you could spot the problem, raise your hand. Yeah. This person, I give them credit. They did all the work and to get so far and to not check spell check. This is why spell check exists.
There's no autocorrect on your house.
No autocorrect on your house. That's right. And then I came across this one as well. Just the sheer detail of like wanting to go up on your roof just to put this up, like bah humbug for real.
There's a bit of Christmas spirit.
A bit, yeah, very little. Just a meh amount.
Meh.
Yeah. And then this is my favorite one of all time. You have this person who decked out their complete house with all these lights, and then this great neighbor just has this brilliant idea, just say, you know what, ditto, same. Yeah.
Look at that one.
Yeah, it's that one person that, like, when you do a group project, and they just copy all the answers. Or just,
their name's still at the top.
Their name's still at the top, that's right. Yeah. What about you? Have you seen any amazing Christmas lights?
We had a couple I took. So this was, we were on a train ride with some Christmas lights, and I saw Bigfoot.
Wow.
Which, both in his real form and in his light form, you can't get a clear photo of him. He has to be blurry and smudgy and obstructed.
Are you sure that's not your phone that's doing the blurriness?
It might be. And then this one, we were with some good friends at Elitch's at the lights, and there was this like purple cone that we saw, and I was like, this would be super cool to take like a selfie shooting up. And my wife did not know she was in the photo, so she just...
Love it. You know what? At least she's smiling.
She's always smiling.
She's always smiling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just photo bombing.
That's awesome.
And I think what's so cool is we as people are like the proverbial moth, drawn to light, like a moth is drawn to the flame. And it makes sense that the way that the Bible depicts God making the world, the first thing he made was light. In the beginning, we're told there was nothing. It's just pure darkness. There's not a glimmer, and then all of a sudden, God speaks light into existence. And so as long as there's been people, there's been light. Is this beautiful creation, this goodness that captures who God is and what he has done. And I think what's so beautiful as we think about Christmas in this season is the prophet Isaiah, we've been looking at his prophecies, and he uses this picture of light to foretell what God was going to do in sending his son Jesus on Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're going to read Isaiah chapter 9, verses 1 and 2. And so we're going to read on the screen here. It says, "But there will be no gloom for her who was in anguish. In the former time he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter time he has made glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations." And now we say this together.
We're getting there.
There we go. "The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light.
Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shone."
So Isaiah talks about the people who have been walking in darkness, who have been struggling in the midst of sin. This great light has appeared to the people. And this is 700 years before the birth of Jesus. And so we've been talking about this great light, and what does this great light reveal to us? But to show us this hope and joy and peace and love that comes in the person and work of Jesus himself.
Yeah, and that's why light is so fitting for Christmas time, especially. I mean, it's been that way for a long time. Like, we obviously use, like, plug-in Christmas lights now, but you look at the old photos where they had, like, candles hanging on their tree, and I would just love to know who pitched that idea. Like, hey, you know that dead plant in our house that's flammable? Like, let's hang flames all around it.
Yeah,
And
not the best idea.
yeah, I can only, you realize why houses used to burn down a lot more than they do now.
Right.
So this has long been associated, but I think part of the reason why it's so fitting is because while this time of year can be such a joyous one, it can be such a happy and nostalgic time, it can also be a really dark time for a lot of us. Not only are the days shorter and the nights longer, and so those with things like seasonal depression suffer all the more this time, but as we celebrate joys like, for a lot of us, we gather with family over Christmas, it's a reminder that for a lot of us that's great, but it also opens up a lot of wounds. It's a reminder of those family members that aren't with us. It's a reminder of the relationships that aren't what they want to be, aren't what we want them to be. And so when we think of light as capturing hope, darkness really captures hopelessness. And each one of us probably has had times in our lives where we felt like we were in the dark, that we were in a very hopeless, dark place.
Yeah. I was just talking with PJ before service about how every other year on Christmas Eve, like, something tragic always happens. Like, one time I killed a bird. That's for another Christmas sermon, but anyways. But I also remember specifically, like, 5 years ago, like, I was going through some really hard times. I remember that my family just went through, like, a really big loss. And so I was filled with all of this sadness with that, especially going into the holidays. And then I was just struggling with work. I was filled with a lot of anxiety. I was struggling, honestly, with seasonal depression and was just really in it. And so 5 years ago, I was actually on my way to a Christmas Eve service. And on the way there, I just started having this huge pain in my head. And it was so painful that it went into the back of my eyes. It was that painful. And by the time I got to church, I was in such excruciating pain that I had to just turn around and go back home. And it was the first time ever that I experienced a migraine from all the things that was just welling up inside of me, all this darkness, all this hopelessness. And for the next 8 hours on, I just dwelt in darkness because that light was so painful for me to experience because it was just so hard to even do things on a regular basis. So
yeah, and that's a great, literal example of having to just kind of sit in the dark.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of us can experience this and can relate to it in some way, whether it's, struggling with employment at some point or marital issues or just a lack of direction at points. There's times where we experience the darkness in this world. And we as people are not great at coping with that. AJ and I, when we were talking about tonight, we came up with kind of 3 ways that we see ourselves and us as people cope with darkness and trying to deal with it. And I think by reflecting on these, it helps us understand why the good news of Jesus' light is so powerful. And so the first one that we came up with is maybe the most counterintuitive, but I think that if you reflect on it, I think it's right, is one of the ways that we cope with darkness is that we try to shade ourselves from the light a bit. So have you ever been like in a dark room and then somebody flips on a light, right? It's pretty startling. And I think there's something in us that when we are going through darkness, we like the idea of light, we like the idea of hope or restoration, but the full meaning of that is pretty startling, like to fully embody what this means. So we like the idea, we like a little bit of light, but we kind of shade our eyes a bit. What does this look like? This is like, when especially we're talking about Christmas and family dynamics, maybe there's that family member that we have a strained relationship with. Maybe we don't spend time talking to them, or when we do see them at the holidays, it's all surface level because of all the pain that's back there. And we like the idea that Jesus is somebody who can bring reconciliation, but to truly bring that about, that might mean that we have to own up to the fact that we are part of the darkness in this relationship, that I haven't been perpetuating light. And that's the thing about light. Light's very revealing. It highlights the good things, and it highlights the bad things too. Another example would be for those of us who have struggled with addiction, whether it's drugs or alcohol, whether it's technology or the pictures and videos that we look at. We like the idea that Jesus forgives, that he absolves, that he saves us from that. But to experience his restoration, the warmth of that light, it also means that I might have to confess to Jesus, I'm pretty powerless against this. And I might actually have to seek out help from a brother or sister in Christ, or from a pastor, or from a counselor. And that means I have to say it to somebody that I have this darkness. And so, again, we like the idea of light, but it's really easy to just want it partially and shaded. When you think of the Bible's filled with people like us who have gone through and lived these kind of things, and so there's nothing really new under the sun. One Bible character that I think of when it comes to kind of that is the character of Jacob. He gets his name changed to Israel, and he becomes kind of the father of God's people. And Jacob was chosen by God to carry on his blessing. God said, you're going to be the father of this nation. And so Jacob loved being the perpetuator of God's blessing and the father of this people. But he also didn't like doing things God's way. He would deceive his brother, and he was not a great husband or father. And a lot of issues arise because Jacob loved the blessing of God, but didn't want to fully embrace the light and do things the way that God desired him to do.
Yeah, another way that we experience the way that we cope with darkness is actually running towards other lights as well, right? There's that temptation to want to find things that will give us satisfaction or give us temporary relief, but the reality is that they won't last, right? Like if you're so caught up in trying to make a name for yourself, you'll spend all of your time going into your career, studying, going through education, wanting to spend all of your work time and past your home time maybe spent on your career, to where you actually miss out on so many other things that God is providing for you. And thinking that you can just drive away the darkness instead of actually embracing the light. Or maybe you spend so much of your time maybe relying on your friends or others for your own individual security, to where you start to lose your identity, you start to lose yourself. And there's a moment where you actually look at yourself in the mirror and you don't recognize who you are anymore, right? You run to this light of seeking acceptance, not from God, but from other people. Or maybe if you find yourself in the middle of the night waking up and you're just dealing with all of this darkness, maybe you're struggling with work, or maybe you're struggling with a relationship, and the first thing that you do is you run to that light that's sitting on your nightstand or sometimes under your pillow, which is your phone, just in case you were wondering what it was.
Did you put it under your pillow?
So most people do.
Really?
Yeah, it's like a large statistic.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask people here, but
okay.
And the constant scrolling, right, in order to escape, when you can't really scroll away the inner work that really needs to be done by God himself. We tend to run towards those other lights. You know, there's an example in Scripture as well, the story of Joseph. You know Joseph, right?
Like rainbow coat dude?
No, other guy, yeah. Mary's baby daddy. Yeah, sorry, didn't practice that either.
We did not practice that one either.
Sorry. There's a scene that happens in the Scriptures where they're betrothed, right? They're supposed to be married. They're engaged. And all of a sudden, Mary goes to Joseph and says, hey, spoiler alert, I'm pregnant, and it's God's baby. It's going to be Jesus. It's going to be the Savior of the world. And the temptation for Joseph is to actually divorce her quietly, to step away from the situation instead of leaning into the hardness, to leaning into God's promises. And the temptation to run to other people's acceptance of what it means to be in a marriage, to be in a healthy relationship, to be in a family that continues to go on. But instead, an angel comes to Joseph and says, hey, I want you to continue to remain faithful to Mary, to avoid these other lights of trying to find acceptance elsewhere, to find acceptance from God himself, because this promise is true and it's real.
Yeah. And then the last one, which is in a lot of ways obviously the most dark, is that sometimes we just immerse deeper in the darkness, or we become content with it. So think of yourself in like a cave, and your eyes are trying to adjust, and you're just kind of wandering deeper and deeper. And sometimes in life, we just kind of tell ourselves things like, well, this is just the way the world is. This is just how it is. Or we tell ourselves, it's not really that dark, right? We kind of trick ourselves into thinking that we can kind of see stuff. And so sometimes the way that we cope with it is we just kind of accept it and stop believing that there could be light out there. And when you think of the Bible, this one story that comes to mind is Jesus tells the story about this son who kind of swears off his family. He wants nothing to do with them other than the money that they can provide. And before he hits rock bottom, he just continues to go deeper and deeper into darkness. So he cuts ties with his family and he runs away. And then he blows all the money on pleasures that are fleeting. And he gets to the point where he's so low and he's so dark that he's tending pigs and he's looking at the pig slop and he's saying, well, maybe I should just eat that. And so he gets to this really, really dark place. And so all three of these are just some of the ways that we as people try to cope with the reality of darkness in this world. And this isn't new, right? Just like these biblical examples, this is something that has been happening. Jesus himself actually tells us that there's going to be people, and part of all of us, that doesn't want the light, that's going to reject the light that Jesus offers. At one point, Jesus is talking to this Jewish leader called Nicodemus, And he says this in John chapter 3. He says, "And this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, and people love the darkness rather than the light, because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed." Yeah. So Jesus 2,000 years ago said, there's light, which is a good thing, but there's a part of us that's going to shield it, it's going to run from it, it's going to go to other lights.
I'm just dropping stuff, sorry. Don't mind me. Just
ruining my moment
Just
here.
ruining your moment, sorry.
Jesus already knew that there's going to be a part of us that tries to deal with the darkness in all sorts of wrong ways. But here's the problem with all three of those things that we talked about. So for instance, when we talk about being content in the darkness, we were never meant to be that way. And so we can try and trick ourselves into thinking it's fine. But again, before God created humans, he created light. Humans were always meant to be born into a world of light. And we were never meant to chase just those fleeting little lights, whether it's our phone, whether it's approval, because those are like a temporary battery, right? So the sun, right? So as far as the earth's concerned, the sun continues to pour energy into the earth, but all of the lights we have, these bulbs, these candles, they're all going to go out eventually. They're temporary, they're fleeting. They might seem to work for a time, but they're not going to last. They're not everlasting. And then when we come to shading light, again, it feels like it works because we like the hope, but again, Jesus' desire for us is not just to have a little bit of what he's offering, but Jesus was willing to give his entire life, his entire being, so we might live in the warm glow of his goodness and his life forever and ever. And so all of these ways that we cope with it, they ultimately are going to fall short.
Yeah, it's so true. And even the ways that we handle darkness, right? It's almost like we walk around with like things written on us, like we're stained human beings. And I have a Sharpie here, which usually provides light and highlights things, right? But if you ever, I don't know if you've ever done this before, maybe as a kid, or maybe I'm just the only weird one that like would write highlighter on my skin sometimes. Would you ever do that? No?
I think you give yourself tattoos in like middle school, right?
There you go.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. So I'm not weird. All right.
Well,
or maybe we're the only weird ones. So. But it's like if you were to write on a Sharpie, you were just write in highlighter just on your hand, you can kind of see it a little bit from a distance, and maybe it's hard for you guys in the back, but sometimes we walk around with things on us, and when people walk by us and we have these conversations with people, people don't know what's really going on with us, right? People don't really know what's happening in the darkness with us, right? And what happens is that Satan, oftentimes, compared to the great light in Jesus, Satan is like the black light. So I have a black light flashlight here, and even though you can't see this, in the black light, what Satan tries to do is he tries to reveal that light. And so many times we're tempted to hide this from people, to hide this from God himself. And what Satan tries to do is he tries to reveal this in order to shame us. And no matter how many times we try to hide in the darkness, no matter how many times we wash our hands or rub our hands together or take a shower or put lotion on, this continues to be revealed because Satan tries to expose us in the midst of a light that's not healthy for us. But one of the great things is that when God comes as the great light to reveal all things, and that even includes even the things that are dark within us, he doesn't come to damn us or to condemn us. He actually comes as the great light to reveal things so that he can save us from that darkness. In John 3:17, in that same conversation that Jesus was having with Nicodemus, just a couple of verses before, Jesus says, "For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him." And this is the great thing about the great light in Jesus, that when he comes down as a baby, as this people have been walking in darkness, including ourselves, see this great light, what we experience is that Christ's light saves, not shames. Christ's light saves, not shames.
Yeah. And I love that picture of the black light. So anyone who knows me knows I'm a bit of a science nerd. I love talking about it. My wife's probably sick of hearing about all these things, but a black light, it emits these wavelengths of light that our eyes can't perceive, but they hit something called phosphors, like in the highlighter, that then shine. So black lights can reveal things, but interestingly, if you were trying to grow plants, you couldn't grow them under a black light, because for a plant to do photosynthesis, it needs a different wavelength of light. So while that is something that can reveal a black light, it can't bring healing, it can't bring life, it can't bring growth. And so again, just contrast that to what you were saying with Satan would love to just expose us and shame us, and yet Jesus came as a light, which is going to reveal things, but it's ultimately to bring healing and restoration to those areas. So yeah, it's going to open up all the worst things, but it's also ultimately meant to bring life. Jesus is the light of life, and so he desires that for all people. that we would receive his light because in doing so, we have life. And in shining upon all the areas of our life, we're able to experience the restoration both here and now, and then when he comes again and brings about everlasting day. You know, we looked at that Isaiah passage earlier, right? Those who were dwelling in darkness have seen a great light. Those walking darkness, on them light has shone. What's amazing is, again, 700 years before that first Christmas, Isaiah was talking about people in darkness, like you, like AJ, like me, that they would receive this light. And what's so cool about this prophecy that Isaiah had is he even told us what form this light was going to come in. Because it's just a few verses later in Isaiah chapter 9 that we're told this. So what form is this light going to come in? For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. So this great light is coming, and he's going to come in the form of this child, this son, that's going to bring about daytime for all of those walking in darkness.
Yeah. You know, PJ, I love these words, Wonderful Counselor. If you've ever been struggling in the dark, it's hard to get out of it on your own, right? It's helpful to have someone who walks alongside you through that, whether you've been to therapy before or you had a really close friend. But God himself, he says he is a wonderful counselor. In the person of Jesus, this light that comes down on Christmas morning as a baby walks with humanity in the midst of their darkness, to be alongside them, to bring about restoration through just being with us. A God who is not far from sin because he's experienced it. He's experienced the darkness and taken on our sin through the cross and in the resurrection, so that he knows all of our struggles, knows our temptations enough to be able to walk alongside us and to bring us out from that. And what's really cool is that Isaiah says that we have a mighty God. We don't have a God who just looks at our sin and is like, no, I can't handle that, and walks away. Instead, he actually engages and he fights for us, and he fights alongside us to be able to overcome that through his blood, through his life. And so we have a God who isn't weak to be able to handle our darkness, but actually chooses to come into the light, and it says the darkness has not overcome it. And then also we have God as an everlasting Father. For those of you guys that have strained relationships, whether it's with your family or with your actual father, you know, sometimes it's really hard to deal with. But God says, I'm going to be a father who's going to stay no matter what. A God who's going to walk alongside you every step of the way, and I'll be here forever. No matter how far you've run into the darkness, he comes to save us. Then ultimately, Isaiah says that he is the Prince of Peace. If you've been experiencing darkness and experiencing chaos in your life, where it just feels like everything just feels like you're experiencing hell, we have a God who actually walks with us and actually descends himself into hell and comes out of the grave victorious with his great light to offer us peace, a peace that sometimes the world cannot understand at all. So we have this Prince of Peace that continues to be with us.
Yeah, and that's all comes in just the person of Jesus. This is all wrapped up in that manger, swaddled on that first Christmas. That this light, this wonderful counselor, this mighty God all appears at first Christmas. And it's in his name and by his power that he continues to work. And just notice how by the very being and the news of Jesus, light comes. Isaiah read earlier our Luke chapter 2 passage, and I want to go back there because after Jesus is born, the first ones that are told are these shepherds, and I want to look at their experiences as they hear about this news of Jesus. This is verses 8 and 9, and we're told, and in the same region there were shepherds out in the field keeping watch over their flock by night. And an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them. So in that moment that they find out about Jesus, they're walking at nighttime, so they're literally in the dark. And then all of a sudden, the news of Jesus, it's glory and it's light and it's shining all around them. And Jesus, the miraculous thing about the first Christmas of this, we call it the incarnation, that God himself would take flesh, is that he would descend into this world of darkness as the light. And as we read in John, the darkness didn't like him, and many people preferred the darkness, and so it fought back against him and ultimately crucified him. And that's why it's not an accident that when Jesus was crucified, we're told that darkness overtook the land. And it seemed like at that point that it was hopeless, like it was complete darkness until Easter, when as the sun rose, light appeared and Jesus returned. And so we get to point to Jesus and his light as his people and believing and trusting in him, not on account of how much light I can muster, but on account of what he has done in his death and resurrection for us.
Yeah. And what's so cool is that even in his earthly ministry, he tells his people, hey, you are the light of the world, right? And so because of this great light and who Jesus is, he says, hey, y'all, that's what Jesus would say if he was here, y'all, not you.
That's what he would say?
Anyways.
AJ translation?
Yeah, AJ translation. Y'all are the light of the world, right? A city on a hill, right? And we continue to reflect after that great light. And so it makes me think of one of the houses that I saw as we were going through and checking these out. We actually get to see this great light. And for us as followers of Jesus being a part of this light, we get to say ditto. I get to stand with this Jesus who is this great light, and I get to be a great light to people who are amidst darkness, to help them walk through and to experience this wonderful counselor, this mighty God, this Prince of Peace, our everlasting Father, who continues to bring us out of darkness into his glorious light.
Yeah. And I don't know if you remember, but earlier we were talking about how we're drawn to light. The first thing God created was light. And I want to emphasize that when God did that, he made light out of nothing. Which means that when we're going through life, no matter how dark a situation is, no matter how hopeless it seems, we don't need to even see a glimmer. It can be pitch black. And at the news of Jesus, at the power of Jesus, there's light. Like those shepherds hearing the news, tending their flocks by night. In Jesus, there's light. So our invitation for you all tonight is just to take a moment to reflect. If there is anything in our life that we have been shading ourselves from God's light, maybe we love the hope aspect, but there's certain aspects that we don't want to turn over to God. We kind of want to keep in the dark. We can just invite him to shine his light on those areas, to embrace his warm glow. Maybe we've been distracting ourselves with all sorts of other lights, these fleeting pleasures of the world that seem to distract us for a while or to make do. And maybe it's a chance to say, God, help me look to you as the true light. And maybe we've been just content in darkness, and it's a chance to say, God, help me to believe that you do offer hope, that I do have a future, that I do have a chance to see a never-ending day when you return, when there's no more of this darkness, no more of this pain, but only light forever and ever. So we're just going to give you just a minute here to